When your brain and body are physically beginning to respond to a dream or to an ideal, the moment that that happens, now you are tuning into a potential that exists in the quantum field. I wanted you to begin to become conscious primarily of how unconscious we spend the majority of our day. And if we know that our personality creates our personal reality, and that's been the theme of this first 2 weeks, and your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. And we've been saying all along that change has to take place by you becoming aware of who you're being. And because of the size of your frontal lobe, the fact that you can observe who you're being, that concept called metacognition, means that you can modify your behaviors to do a better job in life. That you have to begin to become aware of how you are thinking. And if 95% of who we are is a set of memorized unconscious programs, then the moment you become conscious of an unconscious program, and based on how you think, how you act, or how you feel, your awareness then literally begins to create a shift. And that shift then causes you to catch yourself right in the middle of the program. And as you begin to become more conscious of these unconscious states of mind and body, it means you have more dominion and more control over them. And if we begin to understand that we can change the brain and body to no longer live in the past, but to live in some future in the present moment, and that's what meditation is about, that's what creation is about, then you transcend your connection to your current familiar reality, your environment. You begin to become greater than the emotional addictions of the body, and you begin to realize that your body is no longer the mind. When you get to that point now where you free yourself from the chains of those emotional states, now the body's no longer living in the past. And if you can dissociate and forget about time, or become so involved in the creative process that you become no body, no thing, and no time, that's the moment you walk through the door to the quantum field. And as I said last week, that we have all the biological and neurological machinery to do this. That because of the size of the forebrain, when we are truly paying attention and we're truly present, something amazing happens. We become so focused on what we want that the frontal lobe begins to quiet down the circuits in your brain that have to do with your body. And it cools off the circuits in the parietal lobe where you process time. And the moment there's no longer a mind to process your body, your current association to your environment or time, and you become no body, no thing, no time, you no longer are an identity. You're no longer that same personality. And if you're no longer that same personality, and your personality creates your personal reality, the moment you, as the quantum observer, take your attention off your familiar known life as the personality that you think you are, that's the moment you enter into a field of possibility. And as you begin to think about what you do want, the frontal lobe begins to act like a great symphony leader. You begin to create a new mind. And as the brain begins to fire in new ways, in new sequences, and new patterns, and new combinations, once the brain begins to fire in tandem, nerve cells that fire together wire together, you begin to install the neurological hardware ahead of the actual experience, and your brain now is living in the future instead of living in the past. And at the same time, if the thought that you're thinking produces an emotion because you've made the thought that real, that the thought becomes an experience, the moment the thought that you're thinking about becomes an experience, and you begin to feel the emotion of that experience, your body, as the unconscious mind, does not know the difference between the actual experience in reality that's creating the emotion and the emotion that you're fabricating from thought alone. To the body, it's exactly the same. And as you begin to signal new genes in new ways, your body is physically changing to embrace that future event. And when your brain and body are physically beginning to respond to a dream or to an ideal, the moment that that happens, now you are tuning into a potential that exists in the quantum field, and your body will be drawn to that event, or better yet, the event will find you. So as you silence the circuits in your brain that have to do with the old personality, what you're really doing is you're biologically pruning away the circuits that are connected to the old you. And if nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together, the old identity biologically begins to crumble, begins to break apart. And if you're no longer living by the same emotions, then you're no longer signaling the same gene in the same way that keeps you headed for your genetic destiny. So I want to remind you of this information because we're building models of understanding here. And I want to have you begin to reason that as long as you wake up every single day and do the exact same thing and think the same thoughts and perform the same behaviors and live by the same emotional states because you create the same experiences, then there's, according to our definition of everything we've been talking about so far, there's no room for anything new to happen in your life. Quantum physics says something very simple. It says that your subjective mind, your mind, has an effect on the objective world. Now, up until Einstein began to, study quantum physics and his theory on relativity, before that point, Descartes and Newton really had an idea that mind and matter should never be combined, that matter was something solid and mind was something etherical. And because you can study the predictable world, the outside world, the what they call the very large, objective reality, that those laws were predictable and they were repeatable. And because they were predictable and repeatable, it was almost like the universe acted like a big time machine or a big clock, that we could predict how to shoot a rocket to the moon, and we could figure out how fast an apple fell from the tree, because there were laws that govern the physical reality. And if we talked about anything to do with mind, it was too convoluted and it was too abstract, and it wasn't scientific. So this duality that was created by Descartes and Newton separated the idea that mind and matter are related in some way. But when Einstein and Planck began to experiment with subatomic particles, and they began to measure the effects of subatomic particles to look where the photon and where the electron appeared, every time they did an experiment to measure and observe where those particles would be, somehow they mysteriously appeared exactly where they were looking for them. Now, this is a turning point in science, because now there's no experiment in quantum physics that you can perform where you cannot have an observer present. In other words, there has to be some type of subjective mind present in every experiment, because the observer makes a difference in the nature of reality.